Hey, welcome to Holy Bible Explained. This is my new YouTube channel. I'm pretty excited about, and eventually, like in a week or two, maybe at the most, we'll get started in an actual program where I'm gonna go through this whole book, best book ever written, and we'll start at the beginning and kind of work our way through it. But for today, I thought it might be fun just to kind of kick this channel off with a little observance of the Last Supper, being that it's Easter weekend and all. I know Christmas tends to get all the glory, but and Christmas is a wonderful holiday. I don't mean to take anything from it, but it's the work of the cross that gives us the free gift from God for our salvation. So my opinion is Easter is actually more important, just a little bit though. Anyways, to quote my own favorite Bible teacher, who bless his soul has gone on to be with the Lord probably about a year ago, but this will just be an informal Bible study. And today I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. When I really start getting into the meat and potatoes of the whole study thing, though, that we'll probably switch to the King James. I feel it's a more accurate translation, but to keep things a little easier to understand, just grammar-wise and whatnot, I'm just going to go with the New Living Translation for tonight and probably the weekend here. I may refer to the King James once or twice, though, just because there might be a key word here or there that I don't want to miss. So I do have some notes here to hopefully kind of guide me, but I may stray from them. And if you have your own Bible, I suggest grab it and follow along. It can be challenging at first, I know. Everything that you're going to learn from me, I've pretty much learned just in the last 2 or 3 years myself. So I can tell you that if you study along with your own Bible, it sinks in better. I've been listening to a guy that uses the King James, and I've been reading the New Living in tandem, which has been cool because it's helped me to understand the language of the King James a little bit more, since the New Living is easier reading for our modern times. But what I'm going to do here, I'm just going to start off with some famous verses from John 3, chapter 3 of the Gospel of John. That's in your New Testament. And it's verse 16 and 17, which you may or may not have heard. For God loved the world so much that he gave his one and only Son, so that everyone who believes in him will not perish, but have eternal life. God sent his Son into the world not to judge the world, but to save the world through him. And that, I think that sums up the point of Jesus pretty well. Another thing I did want to just hit on here before we start getting into, I'm just going to lay a little background here before we get to the actual Last Supper. I'm going to read a little bit here also from the Gospel of John, because I think it's important to understand, and I think this can be easily missed, but it's important to understand like who Jesus Christ actually is. We think of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, and I think our human minds at times can have a hard time comprehending that it's easy to separate and think that it's 3 separate like entities, but that's not actually the case. It's a triune God. It's 3 in 1. It's It's hard to explain, but Jesus is God, and John says as much right here in chapter 1. In the beginning, the Word already existed. And just if you're not reading along, Word is capitalized. And that's significant. The Word was with God, and the Word was God. He existed in the beginning with God. He existed in the beginning with God. So the Word is a person. The Word is Jesus. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. God sent a man, John the Baptist, to tell about the light, so that everyone might believe because of his testimony. Now, and not to insult, but just so you are aware, John the Baptist is not the John that I'm reading from. This is John, one of the apostles. John the Baptist was the prophet that came to announce the coming of Jesus. John himself was not the light. He was simply a witness to tell about the light. The one who is the true light, who gives light to everyone, was coming into the world. He came into the very world he created, but the world didn't recognize him. He came to his own people, and even they rejected him. But to all who believed him and accepted him, he gave the right to become children of God. They are reborn, not with a physical birth resulting from human passion or plan, but a birth that comes from God. So the Word became human and made his home among us. He was full of unfailing love and faithfulness, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's one and only Son. So there you have it. The Word became human. The Word was God. The Word was with God. The Word is Jesus. Okay. Now I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 16. Whoops. And we're going to be looking for verse 13 in Matthew 16. Okay. And here's one spot where I am going to just reference the King James. It's literally one word difference that I'm looking for, but this is critical to make the point here. And then I'll go back to my New Living Translation. Okay. Matthew chapter 16, verse 13. When Jesus came into the coasts of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, saying, "Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am?" Whom do men say that I, the Son of Man, am? My New Living Translation doesn't have the word I. I wanted to make it very clear that he has made it clear to the disciples, and they understand that he is the Son of Man when he makes that reference. And the reason why I want to make that clear is because in some of these other references, he's going to explain what's going to be happening. So I'm going to go into Matthew chapter 12. I'm looking for verse 40. I'm actually going to start at verse 38 just so we can pick up kind of the context of what's going on. And in my Bible, this New Living Translation of mine happens to be a study Bible. It's got all kinds of little notes and references and things like that, and some nice helpful headers in different areas of the chapter. So in this part, the religious leaders of Israel are asking Jesus for a miraculous sign, like they need some proof of him being who he says he is. So at verse 38 of chapter 12, one day some teachers of religious law and Pharisees came to Jesus and said, "Teacher, we want you to show us a miraculous sign to prove your authority." But Jesus replied, "Only an evil, adulterous generation would demand a miraculous sign. But the only sign I will give them is the sign of the prophet Jonah. For as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish for 3 days and 3 nights, so will the Son of Man be in the heart of the earth for 3 days and 3 nights." So he's kind of giving the religious leaders there a little snippet of what's to come. I am pretty confident that they don't believe that he's saying he's going to be risen in 3 days, because they don't believe him, period. Okay. I'm going to go to Mark. Jesus predicts his death in the book of Mark in 3 consecutive chapters. He does it in chapter 8, 9, and 10. And in both chapters 8 and 9, it just happens to be verse 31. I don't know that there's any significance to that, but it's kind of a coincidence. So in chapter 8, my Bible says, as the heading, Jesus predicts his death the first time. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead. As he talked about this openly with his disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, then reprimanded Peter. "Get away from me, Satan," he said. "You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Now I'm going to go to chapter 9, verse 31, where he predicts his death the second time. And now this one's interesting because this chapter includes a very important tidbit about this, which is also, how would I say, corroborated. I probably said that wrong. But is this little tidbit is confirmed in Luke chapter 18, which I'm going to get to that one next. Okay, so Mark chapter 9, verse 31. I'll start at verse 30 just because it's the beginning of what kind of looks like a paragraph, although I don't know that these are really paragraphs necessarily. Leaving that region, they traveled through Galilee. Jesus didn't want anyone to know he was there, for he wanted to spend more time with his disciples and teach them. He said to them, "The Son of Man is going to be betrayed into the hands of his enemies. He will be killed, but 3 days later he will rise from the dead." And verse 32, this is the one that I want to highlight. They didn't understand what he was saying, however, and they were afraid to ask him what he meant. Okay, now I'm going to jump to Luke chapter 18, verse 31. This is the most, well, I don't know if it's the most famous, but this is the one I am most familiar with because of the Bible teacher I watched to get everything that I'm talking about with y'all. So Luke 18:31. Now in Luke, this is his third predicting of his death. Taking the 12 disciples aside, Jesus said, "Listen, we're going up to Jerusalem, where all the predictions of the prophets concerning the Son of Man will come true. He will be handed over to the Romans, and he will be mocked, treated shamefully, and spit upon. They will flog him with a whip and kill him, but on the third day he will rise again. Verse 34 says, but they didn't understand any of this. The significance of his words was hidden from them, and they failed to grasp what he was talking about. Okay, so I do want to just make a couple of quick points on this one. So they did not understand any of this, and the significance of his words was hid from them. Well, I mean, if you think about it, really, that makes sense, right? Because when he got crucified, for one, if they really understood what was going to happen, I mean, do you think those 12 would have just not done anything? I don't think that's how it would have been. I mean, now granted, I'm theorizing, I guess, a little bit, but given how close they all were and the 3 years they spent with Jesus, and they believed who he was, I mean, if they knew that the Romans were going to put him to death, I don't think they would have tried to interfere at the very least. I'm sure, they're not going to be successful against the Roman army. But Jesus, he knew that this had to happen. So even though in maybe the human aspect of his being, of course, he would have loved to have it be different, which is why he has the praying and the Gethsemane, the Garden of Gethsemane, where he asks God, please take this cup of suffering from me, but if it be your will, and I know I'm butchering that, but we'll be hitting that verse later on here in this video, and then I'll get it right. But anyways, what I'm getting at is, number one, they would have put up more of a resistance, I think, if they knew what was coming. And then, having gotten to the point where he was crucified, if they understood what was going to happen, why wouldn't they have been at the tomb Sunday morning waiting with eager anticipation? I submit that that's exactly what they would have been doing if they understood. So why didn't they understand? Now I'm going to go back to a very important verse in the Old Testament. And this is Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29. And this is an interesting verse because this is applicable many times throughout the Bible. And so what verse 29 says, this verse demonstrates how sovereign God is. Because this Bible, this book of truth, cover to cover, all truth, it's a progressive revelation. It's an unfolding, the rules that God places on humanity, they vary right from the start, right? Adam and Eve, all they had to do was not eat from one tree. And we don't know how long they obeyed that for. It doesn't specify. But at some point, they blew it, right? And then the curse fell on the earth. Well, then things kind of went along. The rules were a little different. It doesn't get into a lot of specifics, but there was clearly some sacrifice involved for atoning for sins, which caused the situation with Cain and Abel. And eventually we'll be getting to all this in much greater depth. So I'm just trying, I know this sounds very vague, but then God called out Abram when he actually called him out to create the nation of Israel. And then they weren't supposed to go to Egypt, but then all of a sudden it was okay for, was it Joseph or Jacob? I get them mixed up a little bit still. I'm still kind of new, but I'm learning. But anyways, all of a sudden it's okay to go to Egypt. And so, but see, God is in control of everything. He can do what he wants. And he can let us know what we need to know in his time. And so anyways, that's enough of me babbling. Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29. The Lord our God has secrets known to no one. We are not accountable for them, but we and our children are accountable forever for all that he has revealed to us, so that we may obey all the terms of these instructions. Now this is one, bear with me just for a moment, because this is one that I do think, even with the old school grammar, I like the way the King James says that one better. 29, Deuteronomy chapter 29, verse 29. The secret things belong unto the Lord our God, but those things which are revealed belong unto us and to our children forever, that we may do all the words of this law. Basically what it's saying is God may have some things that are kept secret, and he doesn't expect us to know or act in accordance with those things, because we can't. But the things that he has revealed to us that we know, which, would be everything in this book, for example, we're very much expected to live by and study and grow in wisdom, etc. And so these disciples did not know what was going to be happening. They had no concept of the crucifixion, the work of the cross that had to happen for the salvation of mankind. And in fact, actually nobody had that until finally the Apostle Paul comes in around chapter 8, I think, in the book of Acts. And we'll be getting to that quite a ways down the road. But anyway, I'm going to pick back up here. I think we're getting about ready to get on to the Last Supper. I covered, yep. Okay, so now Jesus has told his disciples what was going to happen. They didn't understand it. I've kind of explained why they didn't understand it. So I'm going to go to Matthew chapter 26. And we're just going to start at verse 1. This chapter pretty well covers through the Last Supper. And then we're going to look at Mark and Luke a little bit too. So Matthew 26, verse 1. When Jesus had finished saying all these things, he said to his disciples, "As you know, Passover begins in 2 days, and the Son of Man will be handed over to be crucified." At that same time, the leading priests and elders were meeting at the residence of Caiaphas, the high priest, plotting how to capture Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot. Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. While he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume and poured it over his head. The disciples were indignant when they saw this. "What a waste," they said. "It could have been sold for a high price and the money given to the poor." But Jesus, aware of this, replied, "Why criticize this woman for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, but you will not always have me. She has poured this perfume on me to prepare my body for burial. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, this woman's deed will be remembered and discussed." Before I go on, I'm just going to point out one thing there out of what I just read. Good news, that's usually how this New Living Translation says it. It's the same as the word gospel. And the good news Jesus is talking about here is probably not the same good news that we live by today. And I'm not going to get into that today, but we'll be getting very in-depth into that over the coming several videos. I'll probably be an old man by the time we get this all done, or at least older. Okay, anyways, I'm going to pick back up here now. Chapter 26, verse 14. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples went to the leading priests and asked, "How much will you pay me to betray Jesus to you?" And they gave him 30 pieces of silver. From that time on, Judas began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus. Verse 17. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Where do you want us to prepare the Passover meal for you?" "As you go into the city," he told them, "you will see a certain man. Tell him, 'The teacher says, my time has come, and I will eat the Passover meal with my disciples at your house.'" So the disciples did as Jesus told them and prepared the Passover meal there. Now we're at verse 20. When it was evening, Jesus sat down at the table with the 12 disciples. While they were eating, he said, "I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me." Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, "Am I the one, Lord?" He replied, "One of you who has just eaten from this bowl with me will betray me. For the Son of Man must die, as the Scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it will be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born." Judas, the one who would betray him, also asked, "Rabbi, am I the one?" And Jesus told him, "You have said it." So that's kind of an interesting little exchange there. And then it just goes on to the next verse without really expounding upon it. But apparently, Judas, he probably was feeling kind of guilty. So he asked, you would think that he maybe would know that Jesus knew. I don't know. It seems to me like he was probably having some guilt set in, though, As they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "Take this and eat it, for this is my body." And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them and said, "Each of you drink from it, for this is my blood, which confirms the covenant." My page is stuck together. "For this is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice to forgive the sins of many. Mark my words, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it new with you in my Father's kingdom." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. On the way, Jesus told them, "Tonight all of you will desert me, for the Scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep of the flock will be scattered. But after I have been raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Peter declared, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I will never desert you." Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter, this very night, before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." "No," Peter insisted, "even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And all the other disciples vowed the same. So, before I would go on, I know that it can be a little confusing there, because Peter just said, "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you," right? But as we saw in Luke 18:31 and Mark 9:30, it wasn't verse 31 in Mark, but it started at verse 31, that they didn't understand this whole concept that he was going to actually die and be raised on the 3rd day. So, I can't say this for certainty, but to me it seems as though Peter is, speaking like maybe hypothetically, kind of like people do. human nature hasn't really changed a lot, in a couple thousand years. If anything, I almost think we've gotten crueler at times in some ways. But, people say things like, oh, even if I have to die, or I would die for you. And I kind of suspect that's what is going on when Peter says that. Because, when we get to Easter Sunday, there will be more to back up what I'm saying, that these guys didn't know what was going to happen. But we're not going to talk about that until Sunday. Okay, picking up back here at Matthew chapter 26. I am now at verse 36, and Jesus is about to go to the garden. Okay, then Jesus went with them to the olive grove called Gethsemane, and he said, "Sit here while I go over there to pray." He took Peter and Zebedee's 2 sons, James and John, and he became anguished and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." So, the humanity side of him is really starting to feel the weight of this. He knows it has to happen. But, he's God, but he's also got that human aspect. And I just can't even imagine. He went on a little farther and bowed with his face to the ground, praying, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup of suffering be taken away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned to the disciples and found them asleep. He said to Peter, "Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them a second time and prayed, "My Father, if this cup cannot be taken away unless I drink it, your will be done." When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open. So he went to pray a third time, saying the same things again. Then he came to the disciples and said, "Go ahead and sleep. Have your rest. But look, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here." So, it's hard to say if this is still like Thursday night or if we're into early Friday morning now. I think maybe that gets, I can't remember, but that might be brought to light later on here. But, okay. Yeah, we're probably still in Thursday evening, it sounds like, after they had the supper. So, anyhow, Matthew 26, I'm at verse 47. And even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests and elders of the people. The traitor Judas had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss." So Judas came straight to Jesus. "Greetings, Rabbi," he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Jesus said, "My friend, go ahead and do what you have come for," because he knows. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ear. "Put away your sword," Jesus told him. "Those who use the sword will die by the sword. Don't you realize that I could ask my Father for thousands of angels to protect us, and he would send them instantly? But if I did, how would the scriptures be fulfilled that describe what must happen now?" So again, they don't get it, Then, okay, that's at verse 55. Then Jesus said to the crowd, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there teaching every day. But this is all happening to fulfill the words of the prophets as recorded in the scriptures." At that point, all the disciples deserted him and fled. Just like it was written, right? Then the people who had arrested Jesus led him to the home of Caiaphas, the high priest, where the teachers of religious law and the elders had gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed him at a distance and came to the high priest's courtyard. He went in and sat with the guards and waited to see how it would all end. Inside, the leading priests and the entire high council were trying to find witnesses who would lie about Jesus so they could put him to death. But even though they found many who agreed to give false witness, they could not use anyone's testimony. Finally, 2 men came forward who declared, "This man said, 'I am able to destroy the temple of God and rebuild it in 3 days.'" Then the high priest stood up and said to Jesus, "Well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?" But Jesus remained silent. Then the high priest said to him, "I demand in the name of the living God, tell us if you are the Messiah, the Son of God." Jesus replied, "You have said it. And in the future, you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror and said, "Blasphemy! Why do we need other witnesses? You have all heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" "Guilty," they shouted. "He deserves to die." I'm going to just stop here just for a moment because I want to back up. To me this always sounds a little bit funny, but at verse 65 it said the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror. So I don't quite understand what that is. Apparently that was the way they used to show their disgust with things back in Israel in those days, because that kind of behavior is kind of pointed out a number of times throughout the Bible. They'll either tear their clothes or throw dust up in the air. So like I said earlier, I think we're a lot meaner these days. But anyway, I digress. So what is your verdict? Guilty, they shouted. He deserves to die. And then at verse 67, then they began to spit in Jesus' face and beat him with their fists. And some slapped him, jeering, "Prophesy to us, you Messiah. Who hit you that time?" All right, I'm going to finish out this chapter of Matthew. And I think we're going to leave chapter 27 for tomorrow, for Good Friday, because that one starts out as very early in the morning. So I suspect where we're at in the chronology of things, we're probably technically in Friday morning as I'm reading this. Because I think he got arrested like around midnight or something. I'm pretty sure I had heard that somewhere. But we'll just finish out the chapter. It gives me a good starting point for Friday. So verse 69, meanwhile, Peter was sitting outside in the courtyard. A servant girl came over and said to him, "You were one of those with Jesus the Galilean." But Peter denied it in front of everyone. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. That's one time. Later, out by the gate, another servant girl noticed him and said to those standing around, "This man was with Jesus of Nazareth." Again, Peter denied it, this time with an oath. "I didn't even know the man," he said. I apologize. "I don't even know the man," he said. Verse 73 now. A little later, some of the other bystanders came over to Peter and said, "You must be one of them. We can tell by your Galilean accent." Peter swore, "A curse on me if I'm lying. I don't know the man." And immediately the rooster crowed. Suddenly, Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. Before the rooster crows, you will deny 3 times that you even know me. And he went away, Peter did, weeping bitterly. So that's the account of the Last Supper and the arrest, as Matthew's gospel tells it. I also want to take a look at Luke and Mark. With Mark, it's covered in chapter 14. And let's see here. These are some long chapters, I know, but and it's kind of good to, I think, get all of them, just because. And I feel a little bad because I am skipping John, but I opened with John, so I think it's okay. I'm just going to get ready here. So Luke will be chapter 22, and Mark will be chapter 14. And actually, before I do this, I'm going to back up into the Old Testament, because Jesus has referenced this now a couple times about how these things have to happen in order to fulfill the scriptures. So I want to look at Psalms 2. I hope that's the right one. I think it is. Okay, yep. And this is another one. I think it would be better to, if I had the King James going, but I know I'm kind of taking a little longer than I thought I would here, so I'm just going to go ahead and stick with this New Living Translation. Psalms 2, I'm going to just jump in at verse 1. Why are the nations so angry? So in the King James, it says, why do the heathen rage? I've read this one quite a few times. And anytime they say the heathen, or the uncircumcised is another one they call them, but those always mean the Gentiles. And basically, if you don't know what the delineation or the difference is, the Israeli people are the Jewish people, and then anybody that's not them is Gentiles. And so the nation of Israel was God's chosen, called out people based on his Abraham covenant, and we'll be getting into that in the not too far off future, but not today. So anyway, why are the nations so angry? In the King James, it's why do the heathen rage? So they're talking about the Gentile world. And then in this Bible, it just says, why do they waste their time with futile plans? But in the King James, it says something like, and the people waste time on a vain thing, or something like that. And when it says the people, that's talking about the Israelis or the Jewish people. So in this translation, it doesn't make it, I mean, I guess you could say, why are the nations? Maybe it just counts everybody, but in the King James, it makes it very clear that they're talking about the Gentiles and they're talking about the Jews. And then in this version, the next verse kind of makes it a little more clear. Verse 2, the kings of the earth prepare for battle. The rulers plot together against the Lord and against his anointed one. Still not as clear as the King James. The kings of the earth preparing for battle, that would be basically the Roman army or the Gentile empire. And then the rulers plot together. The rulers they're talking about are the religious leaders, Pharisees and such. So the Jewish rulers, they're plotting together against the Lord. And this is all capitalized, which means, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit, but when you see it all capitalized, it's Jehovah, and Jehovah is God the Son. So it's essentially, it's Jesus. I mean, a lot of people probably don't realize it, but Jesus Christ is actually in the Old Testament too, quite often, just not in human form as when he came to earth for his earthly ministry. So the kings of earth prepare for battle, and the rulers plot together against the Lord and against his anointed one. Let us break their chains, they cry, and free ourselves from slavery to God. And then, but the one who rules in heaven laughs. The Lord scoffs at them. And so, after verse 3, which was, let us break their chains, they cry, and free ourselves from slavery to God, they were like, no, we won't be ruled by him. And then verse 4 is kind of, that's skipping way ahead. So remember Deuteronomy 29:29, the secret things belong to the Lord. So there's all these gaps in some of these old prophecies where it jumps from Jesus' betrayal and his crucifixion or being put to death, and then all of a sudden the tribulation coming in with God's judgment. But there's never an indication that there's going to be this big time gap in between that. That wasn't revealed until the Apostle Paul. But again, I'm getting ahead of myself. Isaiah 53. Okay, I'm going to start at verse 1. I'm not going to go through all of this, but I just want to get to the... Well, we'll go until I think I've made the point here. So Isaiah 53, verse 1. Who has believed our message? To whom has the Lord revealed his powerful arm? My servant grew up in the Lord's presence like a tender green shoot, like a root in dry ground. My servant being the Lord Jesus. There was nothing beautiful or majestic about his appearance, nothing to attract us to him. He was despised and rejected, a man of sorrows, acquainted with deepest grief. Which, why would he not be, knowing why he's here, right? We turned our backs on him and looked the other way. He was despised and we did not care. So Isaiah is speaking, when he says we, he's talking about the nation of Israel predominantly, because they were supposed to accept him as their king, but they didn't. Yet it was our weaknesses he carried. It was our sorrows that weighed him down. And we thought his troubles were a punishment from God, a punishment for his own sins. But he was pierced for our rebellion. And Isaiah's writing this 700 years before Jesus is even born. That's important to note. He was pierced for our rebellion, crushed for our sins. He was beaten so we could be whole. He was whipped so we could be healed. All of us, like sheep, have strayed away. We have left God's paths to follow our own. Yet the Lord laid on him the sins of us all. So, that's the price he paid for everybody that wants to just accept it. And it's always been a very small few in comparison to the whole of humanity. Okay, Mark chapter 14, kind of the same thing we're going to go through here, but I want to get these guys different, very slightly different spins. They're so similar. It's like they corroborate one another. There's my word again. Chapter 14 in Mark, starting at verse 1. It was now 2 days before Passover and the festival of unleavened bread. The leading priests and the teachers of religious law were still looking for an opportunity to capture Jesus secretly and kill him. But not during the Passover celebration, they agreed, or the people may riot. So that's exactly what it said in Matthew, right? Meanwhile, Jesus was in Bethany at the home of Simon, a man who had previously had leprosy. While he was eating, a woman came in with a beautiful alabaster jar of expensive perfume made from essence of nard. She broke open the jar and poured the perfume over his head. Some of those at the table were indignant. Why waste such expensive perfume? They asked. It could have been sold for a year's wages and the money given to the poor. So they scolded her harshly. But Jesus replied, "Leave her alone. Why criticize her for doing such a good thing to me? You will always have the poor among you, and you can help them whenever you want to, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could and has anointed my body for burial ahead of time. I tell you the truth, wherever the good news is preached throughout the world, This woman's deed will be remembered and discussed. Then Judas Iscariot, one of the 12 disciples, went to the leading priests to arrange to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted when they heard why he had come, and they promised to give him money. So he began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed, Jesus' disciples asked him, "Where do you want us to go to prepare the Passover meal for you?" So Jesus sent 2 of them into Jerusalem with these instructions. As you go into the city, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you. Follow him. So we got a little extra detail there that we didn't have in Matthew. This man has a pitcher of water. At the house he enters, say to the owner, "The teacher asks, where's the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?" He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up. That is where you should prepare our meal. So the 2 disciples went into the city and found everything just as Jesus had said, and they prepared the Passover meal there. In the evening, Jesus arrived with the 12 disciples. As they were at the table eating, Jesus said, "I tell you the truth, one of you eating with me here will betray me." Greatly distressed, each one asked in turn, "Am I the one?" He replied, "It is one of you 12 who is eating from this bowl with me. For the Son of Man must die, as the Scriptures declared long ago. But how terrible it would be for the one who betrays him. It would be far better for that man if he had never been born." As they were eating, Jesus took some bread and blessed it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "Take it, for this is my body." And he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. He gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said to them, "This is my blood, which confirms the covenant between God and his people. It is poured out as a sacrifice for many. I tell you the truth, I will not drink wine again until the day I drink it new in the kingdom of God." Then they sang a hymn and went out to the Mount of Olives. So this is all exactly, there is no discrepancy between Mark's account of it and Matthew's. Mark, we got a couple little extra details there, which is why it's good to kind of read and compare all of them. On the way, and I'm at verse 27, by the way, if you're not following along, or if you are and you're in a different translation and maybe got a little bit off track there. Mark chapter 14, verse 27. On the way, Jesus told them, "All of you will desert me, for the Scriptures say, God will strike the shepherd, and the sheep will be scattered. But after I am raised from the dead, I will go ahead of you to Galilee and meet you there." Peter said to him, "Even if everyone else deserts you, I never will." And Jesus replied, "I tell you the truth, Peter. This very night, before the rooster crows twice, you will deny me 3 times that you even know me." So that one's a little bit different. Before, he was going to just, before the rooster crowed. Now he says before the rooster crows twice. "No," Peter declared emphatically. "Even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you." And all the others vowed the same. By the way, I wasn't nitpicking about the rooster crowing thing. It's just, a small detail, kind of one of those it is what it is sort of things. Now at verse 32, we're getting back into this agonizing in the garden. So they went to the olive grove called Gethsemane. Well, that's almost verbatim. And Jesus said, "Sit here while I go and pray." He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me." He went on a little further and fell to the ground. He prayed that if it were possible, the awful hour awaiting him might pass him by. "Abba, Father," he cried out, "everything is possible for you. Please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then he returned and found the disciples asleep. He said to Peter, "Simon, are you asleep?
Couldn't you watch with me even 1 hour? Keep watch and pray, so that you will not give in to temptation. For the spirit is willing, but the body is weak." Then Jesus left them again and prayed the same prayer as before. When he returned to them again, he found them sleeping, for they couldn't keep their eyes open, and they didn't know what to say. When he returned to them the third time, he said, "Go ahead and sleep, have your rest." But no, the time has come. The Son of Man is betrayed into the hands of sinners. Up, let's be going. Look, my betrayer is here. And immediately, even as Jesus said this, Judas, one of the 12 disciples, arrived with a crowd of men armed with swords and clubs. They had been sent by the leading priests, the teachers of religious law, and the elders. The traitor, Judas, had given them a prearranged signal. "You will know which one to arrest when I greet him with a kiss. Then you can take him away under guard." As soon as they arrived, Judas walked up to Jesus. "Rabbi," he exclaimed, and gave him the kiss. Then the others grabbed Jesus and arrested him. But one of the men with Jesus pulled out his sword and struck the high priest's slave, slashing off his ear. Jesus asked them, "Am I some dangerous revolutionary that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there among you teaching every day. But these things are happening to fulfill what the scriptures say about me." Then all his disciples deserted him and ran away. One young man following behind was clothed in only a long linen shirt. When the mob tried to grab him, he slipped out of his shirt and ran away naked. Now that's an odd extra tidbit that wasn't in Matthew. I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what the significance of that guy is. Do they say anything about it? Well, okay. My little footnotes here say, tradition says that this young man may have been John Mark, the writer of this gospel. The incident is not mentioned in any of the other accounts. Well, as we already saw, it was not mentioned in Matthew. So that would just be about right. Mark goes streaking and then writes about it in his own account. But I apologize. I shouldn't joke about it. But sorry, that verse just struck me a little funny. I'm not sure I'd seen that one. Still in chapter 14 of Mark. Now we're at verse 53. We're getting down to, and I'm going to, like I did with Matthew, when we get to chapter 15, I'm going to cut it because that one starts very early in the morning. So we'll be discussing Good Friday at that point. So anyway, at verse 53 of chapter 14, they took Jesus to the high priest's home where the leading priests, the elders, and the teachers of religious law had gathered. Meanwhile, Peter followed him at a distance and went right into the high priest's courtyard. There he sat with guards, warming himself by the fire. Inside, the leading priests and the entire high council were trying to find evidence against Jesus so they could put him to death. But they couldn't find any. Many false witnesses spoke against him, but they contradicted each other. Finally, some men stood up and gave this false testimony. "We heard him say, 'I will destroy this temple made with human hands, and in 3 days I will build another made without human hands.'" But even then they didn't get their stories straight. Then the high priest stood up before the others and asked Jesus, "Well, aren't you going to answer these charges? What do you have to say for yourself?" But Jesus was silent and made no reply. Then the high priest asked him, "Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?" Jesus said, "I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated in the place of power at God's right hand and coming on the clouds of heaven." Then the high priest tore his clothing to show his horror and said, "Why do we need other witnesses? You've all heard his blasphemy. What is your verdict?" "Guilty," they all cried. "He deserves to die." Then some of them began to spit at him, and they blindfolded him and beat him with their fists. "Prophesy to us," they jeered, and the guards slapped him as they took him away. Verse 66. Meanwhile, Peter was in the courtyard below. One of the servant girls who worked for the high priest came by and noticed Peter warming himself at the fire. She looked at him closely and said, "You were one of those with Jesus of Nazareth." But Peter denied it. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, and he went out into the entryway. Just then a rooster crowed. When the servant girl saw him standing there, she began telling the others, "This man is definitely one of them," but Peter denied it again. A little later, some of the other bystanders confronted Peter and said, "You must be one of them, because you are a Galilean." Peter swore, "A curse on me if I'm lying. I don't know this man you're talking about." And immediately the rooster crowed the second time. Suddenly Jesus' words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows twice, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And he broke down and wept. And according to Matthew, ran away as well, which I suspect is accurate. All right, let's see. I know some of this has been a little bit redundant, but you know what? That's okay, because I hope you'll continue to tune in when I start actually going through the Bible, chapter by chapter, verse by verse in greater detail. But I will just say we'll be repeating stuff a lot, and that's how we learn and how it makes sense. And sometimes things don't make sense, like 23 times in a row, but then the 24th time all of a sudden something clicks, God opens your heart, and that's just the way it works. So and I'm not selling anything or making people pay for anything, so I can just repeat stuff however many times it takes, right? Okay, so anyways, we're at Luke chapter 22 now, and we're gonna take a quick look at Luke's account of the events of the Last Supper and into the arrest. And traditionally it's viewed as being a Thursday. I know I was reading that there are some Bible scholars who think it was like Wednesday. Whatever. I mean, it's not really worth splitting hairs over. I know there's some of the reasons why they say it's Wednesday has to do with like definitions of what exactly is Passover, and frankly, some of the translating and the way words change over the course of time, over 2,000 years, I think maybe some things just don't quite mean the same thing, and I don't know. To me, all the chronological way things seem to be lining up here seems to me like I think the Thursday being the Last Supper seems still pretty legit and reasonable, but again, it's inconsequential when it comes right down to it. It's an important event. That's really the bottom line. Anyways, beginning at verse 1 here in Luke 22. The festival of unleavened bread, which is also called Passover, was approaching. The leading priests and teachers of religious law were plotting how to kill Jesus, but they were afraid of the people's reaction. By the way, whatever day this is, I'm still going to stick with it being a Thursday. One thing that I haven't even mentioned, and I would have maybe done this last weekend, but I wasn't ready for this yet. I'm really not even that prepared tonight. But the Sunday, or was it Sunday? Yeah, I think it had to be. Anyway, just a few days prior to this is when he rode into town on the donkey, the Palm Sunday, official Palm Sunday or whatever. So he's been there just for, a handful of days now. And unfortunately, all these religious zealots, I guess, have had quite enough at this point. Pretty crazy. Jumping back in here at verse 3. Okay, now this gets a little bit more, I think it almost is obvious and goes without saying, but Luke doesn't go without saying. He says it, why Judas did what he did. Verse 3. Then Satan entered into Judas Iscariot, who was one of the 12 disciples, and he went to the leading priests and captains of the temple guard to discuss the best way to betray Jesus to them. They were delighted, and they promised to give him money. So he agreed and began looking for an opportunity to betray Jesus so they could arrest him when the crowds weren't around. Verse 7. Now the festival of unleavened bread arrived, when the Passover lamb is sacrificed. Jesus sent Peter and John ahead and said, "Go and prepare the Passover meal so we can eat it together." "Where do you want to prepare it? Or where do you want us to prepare it?" they asked him. He replied, "As soon as you enter Jerusalem, a man carrying a pitcher of water will meet you. Follow him. At the house he enters, say to the owner, 'The teacher asks, where's the guest room where I can eat the Passover meal with my disciples?' He will take you upstairs to a large room that is already set up. That is where you should prepare our meal." They went off to the city and found everything just as Jesus had said, and they prepared the Passover meal there. Verse 14. When the time came, Jesus and the apostles sat down together at the table. Jesus said, "I have been very eager to eat this Passover meal with you before my suffering begins. For I tell you now that I won't eat this meal again until its meaning is fulfilled in the kingdom of God." Then he took a cup of wine and gave thanks to God for it. Then he said, "Take this and share it among yourselves, for I will not drink wine again until the kingdom of God has come." He took some bread and gave thanks to God for it. Then he broke it in pieces and gave it to the disciples, saying, "This is my body which is given for you. Do this to remember me." So here's one of those small differences that I don't think it's significant in any way, but just, in the other two accounts, they did the bread first and then the wine, and this time he did the wine first. And it may be, maybe it's not even like, maybe Luke's just saying it however, Ultimately, it doesn't really matter. I noticed those things, and so I just pointed out. Verse 20, after supper, he took another cup of wine and said, "This cup is the new covenant between God and his people, an agreement confirmed with my blood, which is poured out as a sacrifice for you. But here at this table, sitting among us as a friend, is the man who will betray me, for it has been determined that the Son of Man must die. But what sorrow awaits the one who betrays him?" The disciples began to ask each other which of them would ever do such a thing. Then they began to argue among themselves about who would be the greatest among them. Jesus told them, "In this world, the kings and great men lord it over their people, yet they are called friends of the people. But among you it will be different. Those who are the greatest among you should take the lowest rank, and the leader should be like a servant. Who is more important, the one who sits at the table or the one who serves? The one who sits at the table, of course, but not here, for I am among you as the one who serves. You have stayed with me in my time of trial, and just as my Father has granted me a kingdom, I now grant you the right to eat and drink at my table in my kingdom. And you will sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel." And he says something similar in, I forget which chapter, but it's in the book of Matthew, where I think it's Peter asks, "What will we have for giving up everything and following you, Lord?" And Jesus says the same thing. He says, you will sit on 12 thrones and rule the tribes of Israel. Anyway, just a little aside there. Luke chapter 22, verse 31. "Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift each of you like wheat. But I have pleaded in prayer for you, Simon, that your faith should not fail. So when you have repented and turned to me again, strengthen your brothers." So that's a little bit different account there that we didn't hear in Matthew and Mark, where Jesus has basically told Simon that he's out, which is Peter, by the way. Peter, Simon, same guy. Pardon me. So like Jesus knows he's going to be denied, and he's already prayed for Simon's repentance in advance. Peter said, "Lord, I'm ready to go to prison with you and even to die with you." But Jesus said, "Peter, let me tell you something. Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." Then Jesus asked them, When I sent you out to preach the good news, and you did not have money, a traveler's bag, or extra clothing, did you need anything?" "No," they replied. "But now," he said, "take your money and a traveler's bag, and if you don't have a sword, sell your cloak and buy one. For the time has come for this prophecy about me to be fulfilled." He was counted among the rebels. Yes, everything written about me by the prophets will come true. "Look, Lord," they replied, "we have 2 swords among us." "That's enough," he said. Verse 39. Then, accompanied by the disciples, Jesus left the upstairs room and went as usual to the Mount of Olives. There he told them, "Pray that you will not give in to temptation." He walked away about a stone's throw and knelt down and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, please take this cup of suffering away from me. Yet I want your will to be done, not mine." Then an angel from heaven appeared and strengthened him. He prayed more fervently, and he was in such agony of spirit that his sweat fell to the ground like great drops of blood. So the other 2 Gospels didn't make that point, but in Luke, that's where they say he was sweating blood. At last he stood up and returned to the disciples, only to find them asleep, exhausted from grief. "Why are you sleeping?" he asked them. "Get up and pray so that you will not give in to temptation." But even as Jesus said this, a crowd approached, led by Judas, one of the 12 disciples. Judas walked over to Jesus to greet him with a kiss, but Jesus said, "Judas, would you betray the Son of Man with a kiss?" When the other disciples saw what was about to happen, they exclaimed, "Lord, should we fight? We brought the swords." And one of them struck at the high priest's slave, slashing off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this." And he touched the man's ear and healed him. So Luke gives us that extra detail there too, right? Because it wasn't mentioned in Matthew or Mark, but Jesus did heal the guy, the guard that, or the high priest's slave, I guess I should say, that had his ear slashed off. Verse 52. Then Jesus spoke to the leading priests, the captains of the temple guard, and the elders who had come for him. "Am I some dangerous revolutionary," he asked, "that you come with swords and clubs to arrest me? Why didn't you arrest me in the temple? I was there every day. But this is your moment, the time when the power of darkness reigns." So I'm at verse 54 now. So they arrested him and led him to the high priest's home, and Peter followed at a distance. The guards lit a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat around it, and Peter joined them there. A servant girl noticed him in the firelight and began staring at him. Finally, she said, "This man was one of Jesus' followers." But Peter denied it. "Woman," he said, "I don't even know him." After a while, someone else looked at him and said, "You must be one of them." "No, man, I'm not," Peter retorted. About an hour later, someone else insisted, "This must be one of them because he is a Galilean too." But Peter said, "Man, I don't know what you are talking about." And immediately, while he was still speaking, the rooster crowed. Now here's a new detail in Luke's account that we didn't get from Matthew and Mark. At that moment, the Lord turned and looked at Peter. Suddenly, the Lord's words flashed through Peter's mind. "Before the rooster crows tomorrow morning, you will deny 3 times that you even know me." And Peter left the courtyard weeping bitterly. The guards in charge of Jesus began mocking and beating him. They blindfolded him and said, "Prophesy to us. Who hit you that time?" And they hurled all sorts of terrible insults at him. Okay, now I'm not going to finish Luke. There's only like a few verses left, but the chapter break isn't quite the same. So the next verse is the at daybreak. So that's where Good Friday is going to be kicking off. And like I said, I'm not going to go through John's account. I'm going to take a look at it on my own time just to see if there's any other like kind of loose ends we can tie up. But in the meanwhile, thank you for tuning in if you watched this very first episode. And this whole little Easter weekend thing is pretty different than what I'll be doing, when I get into the actual Bible study material. But I definitely hope you'll continue tuning in. This is the greatest story ever written. Stay blessed.